Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our practice edition where we take improvements we made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. This is episode 119. I am Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda Cards.
And I am Devin Bedoni of Lichen Precision. And our quote for the week: if we reduce batch sizes by half, we also reduce by half the time it will take to process a batch. That means we reduce Q and weight by half as well. Reduce those by half and we reduce by about half the total time parts spend in the plant. Reduce the time parts spend in the plant and our total lead time condenses. And with faster turnaround on orders, customers get their orders faster. Eliyahu M. Goldratt. Sounds very
hard to argue with.
Sounds very obvious once it's spelled out.
Yeah. I think this is a very strong case of operation focused and process blind. Because if you take that as the starting point of like, we want to deliver in X amount of time.
Yeah.
And go, okay, what do we need to do to make that happen? I think it's much easier to go like, well, we already have the machine set up. Let's just make like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. But it is a good reminder.
Yeah. And in the context of silver bullets, this rate's pretty high.
Yeah, I think this is the one he was talking about. Yeah. And actually, you're a good example of this. Like, you've started taking work that I think a lot of it you're winning because you're able to deliver fast.
Yeah, I'm not even delivering that fast.
Well,
but
that's what you think.
I guess.
But if other people are quoting and not confident in their quotes, so they're quoting long lead times, you're able to charge more. Because I think part of the rationale of big batch sizes is often efficiency. Mm-hmm. In that operation, right? But like, what if you could charge double if you could deliver in half the time? Anyway, I don't know. Like, there is value in speed, and we see that with like, well, everything. Amazon Prime.
Yeah, right. Because Amazon went from being a budget option to not. I believe this is true. Often not being the cheaper option. Yeah, but it's the most convenient and quick.
For sure.
Yeah. So clearly it has value to people.
Yeah. It's a good reminder. This reminds me of a quote I think we had on here, but like from Poppy Bezos, as he's colloquially known, said like, you know, if you take bets on things that will always be true, you can sink a lot of work into them without being worried that people will want it when you're done.
Wait, let me think.
So like in his case, he was like, people always want fast delivery and people will always want low prices. So if we spend time delivering those things, mm-hmm. It's not like some new innovation is going to obsolete that effort. I mean, that's not exactly true because someone could come up with a much better way of delivering fast lead times at low cost. But the general premise is just like focus on things. I mean, the other quote is like focus on things that make your beer taste better.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it will always be true that people want faster delivery times. And so, you know how like Toyota flips the whole thing on its head of like costs plus profit equals sale price?
Sure.
And instead they go like sale price minus cost equals profit.
Yeah. And
putting the onus on the costs.
Right.
And driving them down. I think similarly, businesses maybe approach it of like, this is how we make this thing. Then we add some buffer to it, and here's our lead time. Instead of like, what do we want our lead time to be, and how do we meet that? And now let's make that a viable process.
Right. It's terrifying. That's why. Or it can be. To sort of engage in that. Well, I guess if you do it first and then start promising it, that doesn't have to be terrifying. But when you start to promise things that are at the edge of your capability.
Oh, totally. I think. Yeah. We had a really interesting insight from this guy we're working with. He looked at Arda, looked at our like strategic plan and some other stuff. And he's like, you're really focused. Two really interesting insights. One, he's like, you're really focused on reducing waste. And he's like, the problem with that is that what is the maximum value of that waste reduction? 100%, right? And so you can never exceed that in terms of the value you're delivering. Whereas if you focus more on the upsides, then your theoretical total value is infinite. I mean, probably caps out on maybe the size of the company.
Sure.
Right, but like still, it's like not just
constrained the same way.
Yeah, and so I thought that was a very insightful thing. But the place he recommended doing this, which is what reminded me of it, was in this is really interesting for two reasons. Is giving visibility to the sales team to understand the production process so that they can make promises that they know they can deliver. Because like, you know, and you're like, 6 weeks because I made that number up and we never go over 6 weeks.
Sounds like a long time.
Yeah, I'll say 6 weeks. So, and he was like, that allows you to, like, suddenly you're driving value, upside value is like, we can deliver, we can shorten your lead times. So you're going to win more bids and you know, you're going to actually meet those promises. But then also in selling into enterprises, having a champion who is in the sales department means you have a champion in their profit center instead of having a champion in like operations, which is kind of like the whiny people who always complain. Anyway, I just thought that was all kind of
interesting,
kind of a fascinating way of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were all like, it's 10 times faster to place your orders. And it's like, okay, cool. Which is pretty cool, but yeah.
So what, I mean, maybe you don't want to get into it on the podcast, but what was his like sort of thinking of like what that looks like in your business in terms of like, right, you're focusing on reducing waste right now. What does it look like to focus on the positives?
Oh yeah. So saying things like that quote from Goldratt, right? Is like, with this system, it's going to enable you to cut your batch sizes. It's going to enable you to understand the load on the system live that is real. It's not some plan that your ERP came up with and then you walk out on the shop floor and you're like, hey, is this going to happen? And they're like, oh, definitely not. That was based on whatever assumptions. So yeah, faster lead times, faster delivery times, like those are sort of the same thing, but like being able to meet your promises. Yeah. But then also building analytics that start to show that upside rather than just building analytics pages that show the elimination of downside or something, right? Yeah. Like we can say, okay, orders typically take, 4 to 8 minutes per item without ARDA, and then normally like 1 to 2 minutes per item with ARDA. So then you can say, okay, you placed 500 orders, you saved this many minutes at this wage that equates to this much money, and look, you're only paying us this much money, right? That's all focused on downside. Yeah. And so yeah, it was sort of like so definitely more, I don't really have concrete we haven't built any of that stuff, but
live load tracking is huge. Yeah. Like there's very complicated factory monitoring systems to do that only sort of work a lot of the time. Yeah. And because I think they're trying to be extremely granular. Right. But at the end of the day, what matters is the stuff moving through the shop and being ready to sell. Right. And so it's kind of a cool way to be able to pull metrics from, like, as Goldratt says, like in alignment with the purposes of the organization. If you can tell how quickly things are moving through the company and when they're able to be sold and where there's a lot of load, that's kind of the only thing that matters at the end of the day. And it's up to the people doing improvements and working on the specifics, how to like make that happen faster, right? Like I think oftentimes we're like, we'll increase spindle utilization or whatever, any kind of asset utilization, we will do better. Yeah. Not necessarily the case. But if you're like, okay, we keep seeing that all of this stuff gets blocked in this region. We need to make it go through faster. We don't care how you do it.
Any way you like. Yeah.
Right? Like, if that means running the machines more, great. If that means running the machines less, great.
Right.
Make the stuff come through faster, and then the business will be better for it. It's kind of a cool, I don't know, that I've thought about that concept before, but not in relation to ARDA, and that's cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, all pioneered by Toyota in that, like, the concept of visual factories is a big focus there, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think you kind of hit that nail on the head, which we keep running into, is people get really obsessed with data without asking, like, what is the purpose of this data?
Right.
Like, granularly understanding your machine, like spindle on, in cut, out of cut, et cetera, what is the goal there? Right. And I think it's many things. Like, I'm not saying those metrics aren't useful ever.
They can be very useful for certain things.
Totally.
Yeah.
But actually, utilization, you don't care about utilization, because actually, and this is like, in total alignment with that positive outcomes of the organization. Like, if someone comes up with an improvement that cuts cycle time in half, and so their utilization gets cut in half, and they're being tracked on utilization,
right,
they're not going to do that, right? And like, that's a real thing. Like, that happens, right? Yeah. Where people are like, okay, like, you want good utilization, you got good utilization. But yeah, I mean, you start tracking it, and that's what people start caring about.
Right.
I mean, similar to like cost accounting for our buckles. We go like, well, it spends this much time on the machine. It's like, that's sort of neither here nor there.
Yeah.
In a funny way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. It's funny. It's tough though.
It is, because before you have contact with the market, and when you're attempting to, right, like, pricing is often very much like, you're like divining a little bit,
Yeah.
And so we all fall back on
what is it costing? Yeah. Are we going to lose money?
Right. We fall back on cost counting to try and get somewhere close.
Right.
And it often gets you close-ish. But then there's total outliers where things, right, like certain things that crazy profit are made on, because that's not how people value. The people value them very different than
price on value, not costs. Yeah.
Yeah. But you got to do something, I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So like, other things we can do with ARDA, which are kind of cool, is like inventory dollar days. We can get a damn close approximation without doing extra work, which is kind of
Which you might have to explain that to people.
I might have to explain it to myself. So inventory dollar days is Goldrat's metric. He has throughput dollar days and inventory dollar days.
Yeah.
And they are metrics that are in complete alignment with the positive outcomes of the organization. They took a lot of thinking about, but basically inventory dollar days is how many dollars of inventory do you have times the number of days you have it.
Yeah.
And this is another interesting one. It incorporates defects, because if you ship a defect and then 2 months later they come back and they say, hey, by the way, we found this defect, that gets retroactively added to your inventory dollar days as you had that inventory on your books for that total 2 months. So now you want to make sure you don't ship rejects, because suddenly your inventory dollar days are going to go way up.
And why is that? What's the practical outcome of that? Just because you're going to have to remake them?
What do you mean? Why do you care about it going up?
No. Why do rejects that ship count against your inventory dollar days?
Because you want to make sure that it's positively aligned to the incentives of the organization. So if I start measuring your shop on inventory dollar days, and if it goes up, I'm going to like fire you as a vendor, let's say. If I just say, hey, I don't want you to have inventory, you go like, great, I'll ship it to you, right? ASAP, as fast as I can. Right. But now I'm saying, I don't want you to ship stuff if it's a reject. I don't want you to ship stuff that's the wrong stuff. I don't want you to ship like shipping it doesn't count if you do it badly. Yeah. So like that. And so what we
basically,
can do.
so what it's looking at is how much cash flow is tied up, how much cash is tied up in the business.
Yeah. Or like WIP or something.
Yeah.
So what we can do with ARDA or any Kanban with a digital backend is, this is the approximation part, but I think the approximation will be so good relative to the zero added effort, is like, if you scan a card to use inventory, we can assume that your next scan, you used the amount scanned previously, we can just amortize it over time. That's the inaccurate part. Like we can assume if you scanned you scanned it and then 30 days later you scanned it again, we can assume you used that quantity in 30 days, and we can just pretend you used it at a steady rate.
Sure.
And then you can get a number that is other, because I was like, that's a cool number, but how the hell would you get it? Right. That'd be tough. So
yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on, you will only get as granular as your batch size basically, or your
scan,
your bin size.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's still a lot more than most people have.
Yeah, it gives you a great ballpark, and it shows you which departments and which loops have high inventory dollar days, and you can decide accordingly. And the cool thing about dollar days and not just days is if you're holding like 10,000 paper clips for like a month, it's like each paper clip is a penny. You're good.
Right.
Maybe don't, but you're good.
Sure.
So anyway, it accounts for that as well.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like that's a tool that's probably not useful for knowing current state today, but is very useful for knowing what a product cycle looks like over a year and its effect on your business. Yeah,
I think that's right. And one of the things he said in Beyond the Goal,
or you could have a pretty close approximation to how much cash you have tied up at any single point, but where the value would really come into play probably is looking at your loops and how much they routinely carry.
I think there's value in that, but I think there's also value in telling everyone that they need to reduce their inventory dollar days, and then pushing the decision making down to the lowest level and going like, just do that. I don't care how. And this is why metrics are so critical.
Well, within reason. Well, I guess not if you're not shipping scrap.
Right. Yeah. That's why, right? If you pick your metrics badly, you have to say, well, within reason.
Yeah.
And then it's tough. Anyway.
Curious.
Should we talk about improvements?
Sure.
Okay.
Are they silver bullets or are they just incremental?
Oh, I have loads of incremental ones, which is, we should start a second podcast, I think. We only release an episode when
once every 6 months.
Yeah.
Or maybe once every month once we figure out our systemization of it. I can
kick us off.
What did I write here? Okay. This made no sense even to myself. Mostly it's CAM template stuff. Added parameter-driven soft jaws or origin sketches and setups for parts that require multiple operations on the lathe as well as multiple operations on the mill. And then I did the same thing for our new M300 machine. Basically just did a bunch of CAM template updating.
And so that makes programming faster and more reliable, or?
Yeah, faster. Really what I'm trying to reduce there primarily is, it's error proofing is a big part, is maybe a primary driver. That's probably the primary driver. And then second to that is, reducing the amount of head scratching and double checking that's required to make sure that I'm not producing errors and not trying to reinvent the wheel every time I do it.
Interesting.
So, I mean, all pretty classical stuff, but yeah.
Classic lean. Okay, we have, I have to say, most of these improvements Sam did.
Nice.
So new webbing chutes. So we rebuilt our assembly area. I think you saw it. It now is all these, we're using metal studs as a cheap chute material. So we have bins of buckle parts that slide down and each have a Kanban card. And we have everything is in chutes now.
Yeah.
We didn't have all of our webbing colors in the chutes. We just had our common ones. And so when it was an uncommon color or length, we would have to walk over to the cutting station. There's two improvements. The other improvement we did was sort of in the standardization realm. So we eliminated all of our strap lengths except 48-inch straps because we were mostly selling 48s, and you can always cut a strap down and melt it. And
you mean you're not stocking other lengths?
Like you can't, if you go on our website and try to order a different length, like there's no option.
Oh,
to,
yeah.
So we just eliminated them. I mean, if someone reaches out and asks for something custom, I often, like, if we can do it easily, we'll do it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of, I mean, interestingly, kind of counter to Toyota's thing of like, give the customer what they want, right? And offer full variability. And I think it is the fact that if we produced everything to order, we could do it, right? We actually designed a webbing cutting machine where you could type in the length or hit a button for the length and it would spit out a piece that's in the right color in the right length. Uh-huh. And at that point we could, it would really not matter what we're doing. But interestingly, so that's still our end goal, right? Like that's the way. But to get there, we realized that we could approximate that effect for our production, for our assembly station, if we just had stuff available all the time that you could just reach out and grab instead of having to cut everything to order. Uh-huh. And so we did that. And now if that works out well and we increase our volumes, we can invest in the equipment side and then reintroduce different lengths.
I'm not following that last part. So you do have multiple lengths available at assembly? No.
We do not. We have all of the colors in the 1 inch and the 3/4, but we do not have different lengths.
Okay, so current state is you have everything available that you can ship standard.
Yep.
Pre-cut.
Exactly.
And then, gotcha. And if you were but you were doing that with multiple strap lengths? You had like...
No, we just didn't have room on the station to do all the different... Yeah, because we were offering 3 lengths in 2 different webbing widths in 3 different colors. So that starts to be a lot of chutes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. Well, that seems like it sounds like you're not really ignoring the customer either, since they were mostly ordering that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, mostly. I'm sure some people are going to be like, can I have a shorter one? Or
honestly, I have a bunch of yours and I'm like never reached for the shorter. Yeah.
Yeah. No, same.
I do a lot of combining 2 into 1.
That was the other thing is I saw people ordering a lot of 36s and I'm like, you should really get the 48 because I know what happened in a lot of those cases. People measured out what they wanted to cinch down on their bikes or whatever. But you forget that you want some slack to like feed it through and then hold it and yank it. Yeah. Anyway.
Poor people.
48s.
We made a 96 millimeter 0-point adapter for a 3-jaw chuck for our M300. It's for doing lathe work in that machine.
Fancy. I saw that on Instagram. It's kind of cool.
It was kind of cool. Kind of terrifying. It's our first turning project on the machine. And we were turning in a vise, not in a chuck. So it was kind of like, how's this going to work? It worked
just
great.
Fine.
Yeah.
Nice. That's very cool.
Yeah.
We have, for the longest time, we have all these trays that we put our painted parts on. So we have racks of parts that get put into these trays that then slide into the oven. Some improvements to be made there to be sure. But those trays were just kind of floating around and they were always in a big stack. Uh-huh. And so like to get the tray you want for the part you need to do, there's like 2 styles of trays.
Yeah.
And then if they're coming out of the oven hot, there was nowhere really to set them down. So they'd sort of get perched on this like piece of steel pipe that was like an old vent from the paint booth. Uh-huh. So Sam not his fault, just like we've been doing it this way for so long and we finally just have a place to put them.
Nice.
Which in terms of reducing noise, back to our previous episode from last week, in doing that, instantly using it, I realized like how much we can standardize, and the fact that it's not standardized means I'm always like looking for the right rack in whatever place. And then also there's no indication of whether the parts need to go into the oven or if they just came out of the oven. And if you touch parts in either case, not knowing their state, like some of them you're going to mess up the paint, some of them you're going to burn yourself. Right. So like suddenly now that we've systemized the approach, it is so clear how much waste is in the whole system. So there's going to be, it's going to drive a lot of improvements.
Nice. We installed a 3-spindle coolant pump on our R450 machine. So we'd had that on our S700 that we just sold.
Okay.
But we have some work that needs that. Also, that is our primary production machine. So it really made sense to have that option for higher speed drilling, just like process reliability stuff. So that's been on the list for a long time and just had not made time to get around to it. And then we have to do some parts that require it. So that pushed us over the edge to make it happen.
Should I do that on my machine? I do a ton of drilling, but it's in aluminum and an 1/8-inch drill.
Maybe. I don't know. You'd have to call some people and be like, you'd buy some expensive drills, but then they might save you a bunch of time. I don't know how long your drilling takes right now, but do you peck currently?
Oh, I peck, baby.
So you could get rid of pecking.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's pretty deep drilling that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
It's like an 1/8-inch drill,
1/8
1
drill.
inch deep.
Yeah. So it's 8
times deep. That's moderately deep. Yeah. So you could probably blast through that pretty quick. I don't know what kind of feeds you're at. Right
Silver
now,
bullet?
Not
extrusion.
Oh yeah. There you go.
The hole comes built in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Nice improvement.
Yeah.
We added webbing labels. So the front of the chute didn't have labels. So now it has labels. And then in doing that, it was clear that you didn't really have to say like 3/4 inch black, because the assembly area is divided into 3/4 inch and 1 inch, separated left to right.
Oh. And
so instead, we added a red line between them. So like visually, it's very clear where that break is.
Mm-hmm.
It's so like that was all E-tape, right? E-tape in 3 minutes, but it's really helpful. And so now it just says the color on the front, and now in having the color written out, the next thing, of course, you look at it and go like, it should just be the color.
Oh, instead of
having to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
But that's why we call it incremental. We don't like to do things too quickly or too well
first time.
V1. Yeah.
So we've had this ongoing issue where with our job management board. So say, for example, we get an order and it has 3 part numbers, and 2 of the part numbers we have to order material, but one of the part numbers we have material on hand.
Mm-hmm.
That job, in order to accurately display the state of each of those part numbers, you either have to have duplicate information on the tag, because like we have a different area for ordering material and material ordered and material on hand. Either have to have you have to have somewhere on the work order slip that can display that in a way that's notable, or you have to separate them and put them in their respective places.
Yep.
But now they're out of sync in the like queue for what jobs came in first, maybe what needs to be done first.
Gotcha.
Due to lead time constraints or whatever. So there's often been a situation that comes up where somebody puts them in the material ordered or the material on hand one goes in the material on hand. Then it starts like marching through the queue with a bunch of other jobs that it shouldn't be in front of because it's not pressing and these other jobs are pressing, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, we've dealt with it different ways, mostly me going and like reshuffling things, which is not ideal. So I just added a column in each of the different, or in 2 of the different sections, that's just a pause in queue spot. So like if something does have material, but we don't want it to continue marching forward, we just stick it there, and it's just like a holding area where it's like, this material is here, everything is good to move forward when it's ready, but don't until somebody actively does it. So I'm going to try that out and see how it handles it.
Interesting. It strikes me, and I don't understand your job board fully.
Yeah.
But that sounds a little bit like push, in that just because the material is ready doesn't mean it should go to the next op, right? It's more that it can go to the next op.
It can.
I don't know if that changes anything, because then it would be like it's only pulled under certain conditions, but I guess those conditions are sort of some mix of like when it was added to the queue and when it's due and what other things you promised.
Mm-hmm. I think it's complicated by the fact that the board also is a way of displaying state, not just like whether to be pulled or not.
It also is maybe muddying the water that like flow where you can, pull where you must.
Right.
It seems like you're maybe treating it as flow, which is good according to that saying, but maybe you must pull because of other considerations in the plant. I don't know. Maybe that is not insightful at all, but maybe thinking about it in that way of like what would cause something to get pulled rather than just like, okay, well, we have material, so now it does go to the next step. Mm-hmm. And but that's cool.
No, it's a solid point, and we have gotten a little away from the pull side of things just because the system wasn't managing it very effectively.
The pull system?
Yeah.
Interesting.
In that, I think the way it's currently structured, as our lead times have gotten shorter, or maybe it's more like as our workload has gotten larger, mm-hmm. and so like things are moving through at a higher velocity, there's sort of not enough buffer, I think, in the system.
Right. Right. Like, yeah.
For it to work effectively. So like by the time like the state can change so fast on the board that our suppliers can't our supply system can't really keep up with it. So we've ended up being kind of push on our purchasing.
I feel like this is flow where you can, pull where you must, push where you have to. Really must. Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Huh. Okay, this is kind of horrifying to admit. But we rearranged our assembly area quite some time ago. I don't know what it was, 6-8 weeks ago, maybe more.
To be a push system.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we really must. And in doing that, we moved the whole thing sort of across the room, made the aisle down the middle of the shop straight instead of this big serpentine thing. A lot of benefits. There was no air at the new location, and the 1-inch compressed air, the 1-inch cam buckle assembly jig is pneumatic, and so it didn't make the move. And so every 1-inch item every 1-inch cam that had to be assembled, you'd sort of like find the parts, walk back across the shop, assemble the parts, walk back, pull the webbing, sew the webbing. It was stunningly bad, and it went for months. And it just became how you did it, you know? It was like, oh yeah, it's over there. Let me go use it. Great, onwards. Which is just crazy. And anyway, we finally fixed it. We finally were just like, no more. This was part of that product launch. We were launching our 1-inch cam buckles in tactical colors, which not having those for the last 2 years, I think has been a huge loss in revenue. The whole tactical world, I mean, not the whole thing, but like a lot of people in that world love nice things.
Yeah.
All backpacks that are quote unquote tactical, like that whole world is 1-inch. And so anyway, we finally launched them. We were like, this is going to sell well. It has. And so we can't be walking across the shop. So we just did it really quick, and yeah, it's done. Nice. But I was sort of thinking like bigger companies where you don't have even our company. Like there's something amazingly powerful, in my opinion. It's something I'm realizing with developing Arda for small businesses. It is very rare in very large organizations that someone has their head fully wrapped around how the organization functions and the interplay between departments and the effects of doing X in this department and how that's all going to play together.
Sure.
And being able to like hold all of that in your head in one time, and even like in the case of my shop, like look, like in one room, I can see what's happening, all of what's happening, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not all, like there's the e-commerce side of things, but it's very powerful. It's because I think in big organizations, the difficulty to achieve that level of visibility is just like insane. And so developing systems and processes that account for the full picture is that much harder, right? It's sort of funny because you'd think that they're going to develop much better systems, but actually I think we're able to develop better systems potentially.
Cool.
That are more system oriented.
Yeah. So again, on our R450, we had a second rotary installed when we had the M300 installed, but we hadn't started using it because we needed to build tooling for it. And going back a while, when we first built the trunnion for the one side, we built a similar but slightly different trunnion for our S700.
Okay.
Yeah, man. Standardization is the only way. At the time, I was like, the S700 has a little more travel. I want to maximize the potential of that. So it was like a longer trunnion with wider space vices.
Okay.
So anyway, I was going to build a second one like the one on the R450, identical, but we just do not have time. So we got a little barbaric and just chopped the one from the S700 down.
Oh, yeah.
And modified it a little bit, and got it installed on the R450. So now we have nearly identical setups on either side of the pallet.
They're effectively identical.
They're effectively identical.
But they don't look the same.
Yes.
Okay.
And we, at the same time, got all the valving for our air vices.
Oh, shit.
Moved over from our other machine to that machine as well.
To the R450.
To the R450.
Whoa.
So we can start doing air vice work on that machine, which I think will be huge.
That's going to be awesome, even if you're hand loading. It is so nice hand loading in pneumatic vice.
Yeah, the real constraint right now, I think, is going to be on the cam side. And actually, it's not the cam side. The cam side was pretty well figured out. The real constraint was just hardware side with jaws, where we hadn't built out a full library of Op1 jaws, and they're not as easily adjustable as the manual vices.
Yeah.
And the second op soft jaws that we had been making for them were really optimized for very small parts. So they don't really work for a lot of the stuff.
I have a lot of that stuff if you want to borrow the jaws.
We just need to systemize making the ones that we actually want.
Oh, I see.
And then then either buy the Op1 jaws that are adjustable, or
that's what I was talking about. I have the adjustable op ones.
Maybe we'll try it out, but
and then I also have a pretty nice process for making the op to soft jaw blanks.
Yeah.
You, I'm sure, are more capable of it than
me. We have a decent process for the ones we were making. They're just not the right jaw.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyhow, more production work. Hopefully, make it faster.
That's awesome. I'm just going to list these off because we're sort of out of time. But lean wastes are now listed out on our whip board just to kind of refocus on them, jog the brain. And then Sam put up an Andon light, which I really liked because he kept walking up the stairs, and then I would be on the phone. So then he'd wave at me, and I'd be like, I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
And then he'd go back downstairs, and then it was just a lot of walking for no. So he had an Andon light that I can see from upstairs. So when he needs something, he just flips it and then just walk down. And then today he delivered a key of what the different colors mean.
Nice.
Damn, this is awesome. Yeah. So
that's fantastic.
Living the dream.
Cool.
Sort of.
Last but not least, we started a standard meeting template.
Ooh, very nice. Oh, I'm going to have to. Yeah. How's that going?
Good. I mean, it's not all inclusive, but
okay,
it's a place to start.
That's awesome.
Just wrote it on our little whiteboard and been trying to follow it. And I feel like less of an idiot.
That's
So that's
kick in
cool.
the butt.
Also, I think we forget things less that are critical.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right now we're just covering like things that have to ship this week to a customer, like urgent due dates, basically.
Okay.
Things that might need to ship to anodizing this week, so we can prioritize if there's any stock or tooling arriving that day that we need to discuss as a group. Any hurdles that we might need to tackle that day, like any challenges we're expecting.
Okay.
I think that's it for the moment.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Lastly, Kevin Blodgett asked a long question that I meant to get to, so I think we're going to kick that to in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Next week, I guess. But yes, thanks for the question. Really interesting. We're excited to discuss. And if anyone else has any questions, please drop us a line on our Instagram, which is incrementalci. You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com and arda.cards on Instagram and arda.cards online.
And you can find me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, lichenprecision.com on the internet, and we have a Patreon. We'll talk to you soon.